Hello everyone, welcome to this second lecture on project monitoring and control, and in this lecture we will cover the concepts of earned value. Okay, this is a very important concept and it is being widely used by the professionals today, and let's get to understand a little bit of the basics of what earned value means. So in this lecture the outline is as follows. We will first just review the key issues of project monitoring. Then we will get into the earned value concept through an example. Okay, so I will try to introduce the concept through an example because the concept as such is reasonably intuitive. There are a lot of definitions and terminology associated with the concept, which we will then cover and see if from the example which we covered we will be able to derive the definitions and the terminology, and then I will finally summarize what we have covered. Now, when we go back to the previous lecture, this was a slide, kind of a very comprehensive slide, which showed both the planning and monitoring levels, and we looked at several of the planning issues that came through the master plan, macro plan, micro plan. We talked about how execution relies on these plans, and then the feedback comes from execution through the daily progress reports, productivity measurement. And I mentioned that in this class we are not looking at this level of detail, but there are other courses which we cover this level of detail, but here we are mostly looking at the macro plan level. So based on the DPR we get data which gives us weekly reports, and basically the weekly monitoring of the project, which we covered to some extent in the last session. Then as we go beyond the weekly, we go from the macro plan, we have to generate reports for management, and typically this can be in earned value format. Okay, so it need not be in earned value format. There are several companies which are not necessarily using earned value management techniques today, but when we go through some of the basics of this, you will see that there are several advantages of using earned value techniques over your regular monitoring based on cash flow or things like that. So the tool we are covering today in terms of EVM belongs to the planning engineer when he's actually making project level reports, and when he or she is looking at the overall project, the work packages, how are we going to understand the performance, and based on this performance apply control parameters. So when we look at this with reference to the frequency update, we had talked about weekly, bi-weekly or monthly being typical, and this is certainly the weekly or bi-weekly is typical for the lower levels of the plan, that is the micro and between the micro and macro. Earned value is usually on a monthly basis because it's rather tedious to do it on a more frequent basis, and this is we discussed about being too frequent and having we don't necessarily get better control because we monitor it very frequently because of the overhead that's required, and all of this certainly depends on the needs of the project. And like we discussed in the last class, if there is a critical shutdown project, I might have to actually monitor the progress hourly, but then the criticality of the projects mandates that kind of requirement. We also looked at the BIS standard and what it kind of had to show us on how we do project monitoring, and where we looked at how the various elements of the standard look at planning, execution and the reporting. As well as earned value is concerned, we are looking primarily again at the generation of reports, and here you can see planned versus actual, S-curves, variance analysis. So this is a form of report which we will be reviewing and looking at how the earned value concepts contribute to this. Now, to start with the basic introduction to it, I think you're all familiar with this. Okay, so this is something we plotted when we did the resource schedule lecture, and if you recall, we called this the S-curve, and we had when we did this for this particular lecture, we just plotted the manpower, okay, the number of people and the cash flow, okay, the cash flow for the cost for the people. So this was the S-curve, and we did it by actually scheduling the tasks in this bar chart like this, loading it with resources. We had the total resource numbers, we converted the resource numbers to cost, okay, and based on the cost we we have here, for example, cost on this axis, the resources on this axis, and we get a curve which is the cumulative cost curve. And this, we remember, we called it the S curve, and this forms a this kind of curve, the S curve forms a very important basis for planning. We are aware of that. Now, if I take this S curve and kind of show a conceptual S curve on our bridge problem, okay, so this is what we get. We have the activities for the two-span bridge, and I have just shown in concept an S curve which will be the cumulative cost of this project as it goes. Now, I want to actually find the status of this project. I want to know, I want to be able to do periodic updates. We talked about doing this periodic updates in the last session, and we talked about how we get the work done, and we talked about how we measure percentage complete, etc., based on different methods, and we also discussed how these percentage completes can vary depending on the method used. Now, that is at the micro level. Okay, now we come to the next step. This is at the project level. I would like to take an update at, say, day 80, and I would like to know how am I doing with respect to my plan. So, for example, one of the easy ways to do is to be able to get the actual cost. So, I had planned to spend this much money, but I have actually spent this much money by day 80. Can I make any kind of conclusion based on this? Okay, that's something to think about. Or, if I have a second case where I say it was not, in my case 2, I actually spent less than what I had planned to spend on day 80. This is kind of because we always measure the amount of money we spend on the project through accounting systems. This kind of comparison is easy to do, but does it really reflect the state of the project? Can we actually evaluate the project cost performance with this kind of data is something which we need to think about. And the answer is no, okay, because what we are doing in terms, we could have actually spent a lot of money without doing the work. Okay, and if we have spent money without doing work, this will not be indicative of what is actually happening on the field. So let me illustrate that with an example. So let's take a very simple example to illustrate. So let's say there is a trench that needs to be excavated, and this is shows the progress. So this is kind of an illustration of the very simple trench which I'm using in this example. I have a duration of in the x-axis here. I have the length of the trench in the y-axis. So assuming it's a linear progression, and I have cost here. Assuming it's a linear progression and my cost is proportional to the length, I get my S curve in this case takes a straight line, and this is primarily for the cost of equipment rental, because I have to rent this piece of equipment every day and I'm paying for it, and I'm just making that the most expensive part and the primary cost component, and making that the cost of equipment and the operator that comes with it, making that the planned. So this is my S curve. Now let me say that I want an update on day 5. Okay, I come to the project, so about halfway through the project, it's a 10-day project. I come to the project and I want to update on day 5. Now, one straightforward way, or one way we might think is, on day 5 I might have spent about half the money, and I would like to, if I've spent about half the money, I would like to assume the project is 50% complete. Okay, but if I look into the project field book, I might find that actually there was rain, okay, and there was rain on day 3, 4, 5, and there was no work that actually done due to rain. So although money was spent on keeping the equipment and the operator, there was actually no progression of work on that day. So in which case, if my progress is actually this, I could work till day 2, and these 3 days I didn't make any progress on the project. Okay, although I continued to pay for the rental cost of the equipment. So I've actually spent money on the project but not got any work done. So my actual amount spent is as per the planned value, but the work has actually not been completed. So we will see that even though the rental is paid on these days, there is no progression of work. So obviously, from a common sense point of view, we can make out that project is not going as we had planned it. But if I choose to use just the actual money spent, the project will indicate it's going as per plan, which is incorrect. Okay, so we can see here actual cost versus planned cost. We will see that progress is as planned, but we know this is not correct. So progress actually depends on work performed, okay, not actual cost, and we have to somehow bring in the work performed into our metric for monitoring. We should not base it just on money spent. So this is critical. I know it's basically a lot of common sense in what we are discussing here, but you will find that in several projects, especially small projects, it is just easier to measure the money that is spent, and people tend to use money spent as a metric for progress, which, as you can see here, is not indicative of progress. So let's take this example a little further. Now I want to find percentage complete for this, which is fairly easy because it's a single activity. So I have finished 1 out of 5, so it's 20% complete. And if I am going to look at the performance for my schedule, which is something which we need, I will see that on my 5th day I should have been at 50%, but I'm only at 20% as per my measurement, so I'm certainly behind schedule. Okay. Now as for my cost performance, okay, now you can see that we know that we have actually spent 2.5k. Okay, that was because we spent it on the rental of the equipment. Although work was not done, we spent it on the equipment. It was there, we had to pay the rental. So the actual cost of work performed is this much. But now what is the value of the work performed? So we only did 1, okay, 1 out of what was done, which was 20%. We have actually done only 20% of the work, and for the value of the work performed is the 20% into the total value of the project, which is 1k. So this is a very important metric. We have brought in the value of the work performed in order to be able to monitor our project. So we are able to now make a comparison of the cost performance and say actually the actual cost of work performed, okay, is greater than the value of the work performed. That means I've actually spent more money than I've got value for the work that's performed, so over budget cost. So this is a very simple way of introducing the fact that we have to measure value of work performed. Now here we have given, so from this we understand that we are able to measure schedule performance, we are able to measure cost performance through this basic metric. If we are able to take this into a little more formalized form, I can say we have, when you look at schedule performance, I can say we have as scheduled it was supposed to be at 50%, but as performed it's at 20. So because as schedule is greater than as performed, behind schedule, okay, I could come up with a metric, okay, that is percentage as performed divided by percentage as scheduled, which will give me a numerical value of my schedule performance. We will come to more details on this later, but I think you can intuitively see how this number can control or indicate the level of schedule performance. Similarly for cost performance, we have actual cost of work, we have the value of work, and we can now have a ratio of value of work performed, okay, divided by the actual cost performed, and this again, this ratio will give us an indicator of the cost performance of the project. Now in this particular case they happen to be equal, but that need not be so, as we will see later. So in this particular, extending this case, let us say because everything was linear, they happen to be equal, but let's say there were extra costs during the rainy period and my actual cost was more than just the rental, in which case you will see that this value will change. It will need not be equal to this. Now with this simple example, the key concept there which we have introduced is the fact that you need to look at the earned value, the value of work performed, how much value did you earn from this, okay. So that concept is now, we applied it to a single activity, but we have to actually extend it. So here we applied it to a very single activity, we found percentage complete, we could get a feel of what schedule performance was, what cost performance was, but when we get into larger projects, we cannot keep applying it at the activity level alone. We have to not only apply it at the activity level, but at each level of the work breakdown structure. So here I have the activity level, here I have the project level. I would really like to estimate percentage complete of the project, okay, the entire project at my monitoring phase. I would like to know schedule performance of the project. I would like to know the cost performance of the project. So this would be at the highest level of the project, But similarly at each package, so here you have my WBS, at each level of the WBS I would like to estimate these parameters, and that is really the monitoring cycle. So I'll be able to estimate, for example, here the excavation at the substructure level, I'll be able to calculate all of these parameters. At the superstructure, for the superstructure, for the different elements you can see here, okay, mobilization, structure, services, as the project is progressing, at each phase I will be able to calculate these parameters and then make a judgment on my schedule and cost performance of the project. Now, right now we saw percentage complete for a single activity, and we could see that we can measure it based on quantity. Now, if we take multiple activities, so as we obviously we took a single activity here. If I want to measure percentage complete at any level higher than a single activity when there are multiple activities, I cannot use the work done by total quantity, okay, the quantity installed by total quantity as a unit, because as my indicator for percentage complete, because the units are all different. Okay, for example, if I have concreting in meter cubed, reinforcement in tons, plastering in meter squared, and I cannot add these values and divide by total quantity, because it is not, certainly the units are different. So what we do is, the common unit for all of this, all the types of activities that come into a project, is basically the money or man hours. Okay, and these are typically the common unit, that is how many work hours are my people spending, okay, on the project. This is man hours, okay, not absolute hours, this is man hours or the money spent. Now as we move into, so I can use either metric as my indicator for my value of work earned, or the earned value, and for the remaining of this lecture we will use money as the indicator. Okay, we'll continue our example with money as the indicator, or our discussions with money as the indicator, although man hours is also used. And towards the end of the lecture I will kind of give you an insight as to why should we make this choice, and what are the implications of this choice. Now let's take up a little more detailed example, okay, to illustrate more aspects of the earned value analysis. So here I have a project, okay, there are six packages I would say involved, okay. So this project the packages would be at, say, a level here. There are 6 packages involved. I have given you the estimate of quantity of each package, okay. So earthwork, for example, 5,000 cubic meters, concreting, formwork, for reinforcement, brickwork. I have also given the unit rate, okay, the cost per unit for the different items of work or the different packages, and based on this we have actually looked at got the value of work and the total value of this project. Okay, so I'm also given you the project duration is 10 months, and we would like to monitor the status of the project every month. So this is a given. Now based on this, let the project start, okay, and I would like to see on month 3, okay, I've jumped month 1 and 2 for a specific purpose, okay. For month 3 I would want to do an update. So I actually go, so all of this is the same input. What I now calculate, I actually go and measure the work performed at the project, okay, and I look at the quantities. So I then update my quantities here, okay. Remember, this is done from the micro level, might be a DPR. All of this I would get the work performed, from the DPR data I would get all of this, and then I can calculate my percentage complete for each of this. Now when I'm calculating my percentage complete for each item of work, the unit is the same, okay. So it is my work done by total quantity. Unit is the same, I can calculate percentage complete without a problem. I also, in addition to measuring the work performed, I go to my accounts group and get the actual cost of work, and here is the actual money spent, the cost of what I paid for the work. Okay, so here I have the total value of work. Here I have the amount of work that was done in this period, and I have entered the quantities here. Using this and this, I calculate the percentage complete for each item, and independent of this I have spent money on it, okay, and this is the money. So if I am given this kind of an update, will I be able to answer these questions? Okay, what is the project percentage complete? What is the schedule performance? What is the cost performance? Now, you can see for the first question, project percentage, I can actually calculate all the individual items percentage complete here. But how would I calculate project percentage? What is the status of the project today? Okay, that is not so, based on the information I have here, I am not able to immediately see how do I calculate project percentage complete. What about my schedule performance? I know that I am on the third month, I know I have done this much of work, but I have no way of benchmarking it. I don't have a schedule timeline to compare to find what is my schedule performance. And if I try to think my cost performance is my actual cost compared with my total cost, you know from the earlier example that does not necessarily give us a accurate value of cost performance. So we have to think through and see what do I need to do. So the first thing is actually to develop a schedule timeline. So here, based on all the concepts we have covered so far, the planning team needs to go in and do this put each activity on a bar chart or on a timeline like this. Okay, you can use a network analysis to give you the timeline, or based on your resource availability, all the concepts you have covered. So you actually finally the output we have realized is in this form. So I have here, this is the quantity. So I'm scheduling the quantities of earthwork as such, concrete as such, formwork. Okay, these are the quantities, and based on these quantities, I then schedule the expenditure, the scheduled expenditure for each quantity. So what I've done is multiplied the quantity into the item rate which we had earlier, and based on that, okay, the money to be spent. So this you are familiar with from our resource loading sessions. So all this reflects is the money to be spent for each item of work and the month in which the planned money is to be spent. Now once we get this, I think you all are familiar with the fact that we can calculate now I can add up. Okay, I can add up monthly because my units are money. Okay, because my units are money, my units are the same, I am adding it up, and this is now my planned monthly expenditure. I convert that to my cumulative monthly expenditure or my cumulative cash flow, and I have actually now from based on our earlier discussions, we basically have a plan in place. Okay, I can convert this cumulative cash flow into a percentage complete of cash flow. Okay, so this is my final level, my final total. So basically this is 25 by this value and so on. I get my percentage complete in a cumulative form, and this basically forms okay, so here we are just saying that this percentage complete is based on money as a unit. Remember, I could also use man hours, but I am choosing here to use money. Okay, and we then get this S curve. Okay, so basically what the S curve is, the cumulate. So on this side, on the y axis, I have the cost of work scheduled. Okay, so this is the cost of work scheduled, and on this side of the y axis I have the percentage complete. They are proportional because what we are measuring percentage complete here, the planned percentage or the budgeted percentage complete here as a proportion of the cost which I have scheduled for. Okay, the cost of work scheduled. So I think so this forms a basic S curve, and this now gives me a benchmark to be able to compare my progress work to. So I come back. Okay, now here is the table which I had earlier, but now I have a scheduled timeline to compare. Okay, so when I am doing monitoring, this forms the benchmark or the baseline for me to do my monitoring. So how do I use this baseline? So we had the earthwork. Okay, we have the rates given here. Now on month 3 update, what I do is I am now showing the planned or the budgeted value of work scheduled for month 3. This is coming from my S curve. Okay, this specifically is the value of work I have budgeted at month 3. So this is the point which I am interested in. Okay, so you can see this is continuous over all the months as it's planned, but in my third update I am looking at this particular value, okay, and this is the value of work schedule for month 3. Now I have done my measurements, okay, as earlier. I have got my quantity of work which is the same as earlier, and I am now calculating here, what I am calculating here is the rupee value of the work performed for this quantity of work, and based on my earlier the estimated unit rate, what is the value of work I have done in terms of money. Okay, so this is, remember our trenching example, this is actually the value of work. We are looking at what is the value of work that's done. Okay, so this is basically the rate into the quantity of work performed is giving us the value of work. Now, in addition, I also have my actual cost of work performed, which is independent of value. Again, go back to the trenching example. You remember we spent money even though it was raining. There was no further work done, but there was money spent. Okay, so these two can be independent. Okay, they need not be related to the, ideally it should be related, but because of the uncertainties and issues that occur on a project, they need not be, they are independent. Okay, so here we kind of reviewing, I have looked at the work schedule, the monthly, at the plan, and taken what I had expected on month 3. My earthwork would be, so much would have been spent on earthwork, so much on concreting, so much on formwork. This is from the budgeted cost of work scheduled on month 3, and this is from what I had actually performed. Now, one thing we can do now is we can see that we are able to add up these values. Okay, so this is my total value of work as it is scheduled for month 3. This is the value. If I add up these values, earlier I could not add up the percentage complete, because they had all different units. Here it's all money units. I can add it up and I get the value of work performed is 70.6, okay, and the actual cost of work performed is 74.4, and what I had scheduled is 76.8. So now I will be able to answer some of the questions I had posed earlier. For example, in answer to the question what is the project percentage complete, the value of work performed is 70.6, and remember 292 was the total budgeted value of the project, okay, the total budgeted that when we go to month 10. So the current project percentage complete is the ratio of this, which is 24.1, and I could also find what is the schedule performance. So here in my schedule performance I am looking at the value of work performed is 70.6, but actually on month 3 based on the plan I should have been at 76.8. So 70.6 being less than 76.8, I am behind schedule target. Okay. Similarly, if I want to look at what is the cost performance, I have to compare these two values. Okay, the value of work actually performed on the field is only 70.6, but I have paid out of, I have actually paid 74.1. So I have got less value, which means my over budget cost target. That means I paid 74.1 for work that was only worth 70.6 based on my original rate. So I am again behind my cost target. So this is the basis of your monitoring based on earned value management from a very basic and intuitive sense. Now we move into formalizing this in a way, and we use the earned value terminology. So what the column here, okay, what we calculated in terms of the planned value, our original S curve, that is called budgeted cost of work scheduled, or BCWS. Okay, and what we calculated in terms of the value, the value of the work performed, okay, based on calculating our quantity of work and multiplying it by the unit rate and summing it up, that is called the budgeted cost of work performed, or BCWP, and this is the earned value of the project at that update period. Okay, this is the earned value of the activities and summing up to get the earned value of the project. And this, as we have discussed, is the actual cost of work performed. This is the actual amount of money you paid for it. So this is our original estimate, okay, of what we had planned for month 3, okay. This is what we actually spent, and this is the value earned based on the work actually done, okay. So these 3 form the basis of your earned value terminology and concept, and these values are then used for further calculations. So a typical way of looking at project performance, here is a graph. So we have the budgeted cost of work schedule. This is the blue line, okay, budgeted cost of work schedule. Like we said, this is our S curve as per plan, and then we have the other curve, which is the green one, is actual cost of work performed. So this is the cash you're measuring through your accounts, is the money you're actually spending, and then the earned value is the budgeted cost of work performed, okay, which is the red line here, and this is, like we say, obtained based on the quantity, actual quantity, measured quantity of work done, and the original rate estimate, okay. So this is one way of estimating BCWP, okay. This is one way of estimating it. You might want to analyze how is percentage complete related to this. There is a strong relationship you can see between percentage complete of the activities and BCWP. I leave that to you all to kind of find that relationship, okay. It's intuitive, and it's not very complicated. But now coming back to this, we now have what we call the schedule variance, okay, which is, so at a particular review period here, we did exactly this. We calculated budgeted cost of work scheduled, okay. We calculate, we know that we had got from the plan for the particular month, we had taken it at this point. We looked at budgeted cost of work, we calculated the earned value of budgeted cost of work performed, and then we looked at the actual cost of work performed, and the difference between this is the schedule variance, and the difference between these 2 values is the cost variance, as we had discussed in the example.